All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Jason Kuzik from Lewiston PD in Idaho. He has almost 28 years experience on the job, and wellness is something that is evolving and developing in his agency and in his state. And I'm really, really excited to share his unique perspectives on wellness. So, welcome to Words of the Wise, Chief Kuzik. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
You are my first Idaho chief, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, same here. I'm glad I could be on the show and be the first one to be able to represent the state of Idaho for talking about wellness.
Yeah, and when we talked offline, there were a few things that were really important to you in wellness and some really interesting perspectives that you have on different topics of wellness. So I'm really excited to have you share that. But before we do that, I would love for our listeners to get a little background on who you are. And I know you've been, in this career for almost 28 years, so it's a long time to be in law enforcement. So can you give us a little bit of background? How did you get started? What did those 27 and a half, almost 28 years look like for you?
Sure. Yeah, it's been a very fast 27 and a half years. I still have very indelible memories about the academy, which is funny. But yeah, so a little about me. I was born and raised in Las Vegas. I got my bachelor's degree from UNLV in criminal justice. And then eventually made my way into law enforcement. The goal was always to join law enforcement. My initial kind of thoughts were I thought I'd go kind of the federal route, maybe FBI or Secret Service, something along those lines. I ended up with an opportunity to join the Henderson Police Department, which I did.
Okay.
And that's where I spent the bulk of my career. And then just it was fantastic. A patrol officer, then being a field training officer, and then ended up going to being a detective. Did working on a task force full time as a task force officer with the Secret Service. We worked a lot of it was a lot of financial crimes, obviously, but a very high level in multi-state gangs and things like that. After working that, I'm glad I did not go federal. I'm glad I stayed and was a local officer. But then I ended up promoting to sergeant, and then again, field training sergeant. Then I went back to investigations as a sergeant, overseeing financial crimes, computer crimes, special victims unit. Eventually, I promoted to lieutenant, and then captain. And then I retired from the Henderson Police Department in 2022 to accept the position of chief of police for the city of Lewiston. And then so I've been here since October of 22. So that's kind of
Amazing.
my career in a very, very fast timeline.
I love that you said it goes fast because I feel like the older I get, the more I feel like time just flies by. And obviously, there were a lot of things that happened in that 28 years, but thank you for giving us a little snapshot. Um, it's interesting because I don't know if you've heard this, but a lot of chiefs are actually retiring and moving to Idaho.
Yes, that is true. A lot of chiefs are coming here and accepting positions, but even retirees, as far as first responders in general, police, fire, there's a lot from surrounding states that are all moving to Idaho. Yes.
Yeah, and the feedback I get is they're like, I just want to buy a farm with land and then never talk to anyone ever again. It's kind of
Yes,
like,
or down in the Treasure Valley, like in the Boise area. Yeah, you still kind of get that big city feel, but not like a very, even Las Vegas is going to be a very dense city now.
yeah,
A lot of the big cities in LA and the surroundings, yeah, that's what's kind of nice about, Idaho in general. You can pick what you want. Either, yeah, you can buy a farm and then disappear, or you can still have kind of that big city feel, just and everything in between. So,
yeah, absolutely. So I know you come from, like you said, you came from Las Vegas, which is the first time I knew that. And I was like, wow, like he's a desert person like me because I'm from Phoenix. So I'm familiar with Henderson. You moved to Idaho. You've been in this career for 28 years. What has wellness looked like for you personally over those 28 years? You had a lot of different assignments. You worked in, I mean, Henderson is a fairly big city.
yes.
And then now, in the position that you are now as a chief, what has wellness looked like for you?
Well, it's interesting. That's a very good question because, like, when I started, and my career started in 1997, so wellness was never a topic. Um, and in the city of Henderson, as far as the whole Las Vegas Valley, more than both the region and my city grew more than double in its size during the time I was there. So and then all the agencies grew like that. Wellness really, I don't think became a big factor. I'd say even in my career or even in the region to well at least 10 plus years on the job, you know.
Mhm.
So you'd have officers that would, you handle the stressors of the job, whether it be, dealing with family members who've lost people, trauma to children, horrific accidents, officer involved shootings, just runs the gamut. There was kind of the standard old, well, every city and every municipality and everything has like a EAP program. You can so many free visits to a psychologist or whatever. And that's really about it. And it wasn't talked about, it wasn't encouraged, you know. It was just you had to be tough. And that was the mentality
Mhm.
coming onto the job. And even my field training officers is like, well, something happens, just suck it up, buttercup. You
Right.
just dealt with it. And that's kind of how it started. So you almost had to self-regulate how you handled your stress and how you dealt with things. And some people handled it, unfortunately, and it's still true to this day. They would handle it through maybe excessive drinking, or people that would just constantly buying new toys. And there's some outlets somehow. I was very fortunate. I was dating my wife at the time, and she was with me through the whole academy, and she's been with me to this day. And even though she's never been on the job, has no idea really, the day to day, but she's always been a fantastic sounding board. And even our son's the same way. As he matured, he'd start asking questions, and I can explain things. But I always kind of had that. I'd say my outlet was always just my home life, and I figured out ways for myself to have outlets either through recreation and things like that. But as far as organizationally, it's like when I see coworkers going through, it's the same. It's just kind of pre-programmed. Oh, well, did you call human resources and get a call with psychologist? And then eventually there started to be this paradigm shift nationally and then even locally where it's like, well, hey, we
Mhm.
really need to start looking at this. What's causing a lot of these officers to have stress? And of course, it leads to, home life problems and financial struggles, and they just start not being well, and then the poor eating habits and the poor sleep. So even like in my old agency, then that recognition started to come into play, and then a wellness coordinator was eventually created, and then it's really grown into a very, I think, pretty robust program. Um, I would say I don't think I've never visited a psychologist personally. I always felt I've been pretty well adapted throughout the job, even though like I said, like I said, I specialized special victims unit or supervised it, which is just horrific things you see there. Is crisis negotiator for 6 years, SWAT team for a couple of years, lack of sleep, just all that. Um, but I understand where people definitely need it, and I always encouraged it. And as it grew, like I said, and now you're talking concepts of therapy dogs, and and having contract psychologists, and there's just a lot of tools coming into play that and I've seen that evolve over the course of time before I retired from Henderson. That I'm sure, and of course, everything's very anonymous, but I got to imagine really contributes. And and because the goal is you want to have a long career. You don't want
Right.
this to be a 5 or 7 year stop along the way. You invest in an employee, you want them to enjoy the job and be well and healthy before, during, and then after the career as well. So yeah, it's interesting
Makes
because like I
sense.
said, when I came in, there was zero, I thought, really, and now I see it, but you even see it nationwide. There's just a really strong emphasis for the most part, and more tools are being brought to first responders in general. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I share this with you, but I've been in the first responder wellness space for the last 8 years. And even in that short time, I've seen the evolution of wellness and the resources that are now available that weren't even 8 years ago. When I walked into this space, I had a lot of resistance and kind of that mentality of like cops don't do this, and this isn't a part of our culture. And even in that short 8 years, I've seen a huge push for wellness resources and making sure that we're supporting that longevity in the career. And then just like you said, how can we then support longevity after the career so that you can all retire to Idaho and get farms and never speak to anyone again.
Yeah,
But
my farms, and yes, and chickens and all that good stuff. Yes.
100%. But I want to touch on a few things that you said because I think it's important to understand coping mechanisms. And you mentioned this before of, you had healthy outlets and you had support from your family. And I would love to talk about, what that looked like for you in a moment. But we do see those predictable behaviors of escaping and numbing and avoiding and certain addictions. And I say that in like air quotes because I can look at different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean it's
Right.
alcohol or drugs. It could be spending or gambling or sex or whatever that is. And so we start to see those behaviors as a result to not dealing with or not having the resources or wanting to deal with those stressors and those traumatic incidents that you go through cumulatively. And I think that it's important to remember that there are actually healthy coping mechanisms and there's healthy outlets that we can introduce to try to avoid those things from happening. And I think the more resources and the more we talk about it, the more people are going to have kind of that crossroads moment of like, okay, I can do the
Yeah.
escaping and the numbing and the negative type of processing, or I have the option to do this. And it's kind of giving that like off ramp option to people of like, hey, yes, this is still over here. This might feel better and be easier, but this is going to set you up for success if we can give you some positive outlets. And to me, it sounded like you said you had some recreations, and I would love if you could kind of explain maybe what those hobbies or interests were that kind of, helped you to offload some of those things. And then also the power of having a support system within your family. And maybe some people aren't married yet, or they're younger and they're single, but you can still seek that same support through various family members or friends. So what did those two things look like for you? The support from your family, and then what, recreational hobbies or interests did you have?
Sure. So yeah, as got hired and started to go through, the career, like I said, my wife, she was, like I said, neither one of us came from backgrounds of any kind of public safety or first responders, anything like that. So we kind of figured it out together. But I think the biggest thing was I was always very open with her and explained, hey, yeah, this, I'm not name really names, things like that, but just overall, and say, hey, we kind of had something like this going on today, and we talk it through, and then she was just a great listener, and that was the biggest thing that, I think was important throughout the evolution of my career. That's just kind of how it always been. And over time, she is starting to understand the job itself. And then, of course, we make some friends in the department. So we have, group gatherings and, hearing perspectives from other girlfriends and spouses and family members. You kind of, I think she was able to start picking up the importance of having that communication. There's a few times, it's like Dr. Gilmar would talk about, you come home to sit on the couch and disconnect. And I think she started to pick up on those clues on occasion, and she would challenge me on it. Hey, because generally I'm not really that quiet. And when we come home, we'd always
Mhm.
talk and have conversations. And I think she started picking up on some of those signs without ever having even read that book. So she's just been a fantastic partner. Um, so that's, I think, helped me grounded. And I think what was important is and it was very important to me, and I was actually very cognizant of this when I started the career, is that I actually ran into a friend a few years after I got on the job, and we were talking and hanging out, and we were having lunch, I believe. And he told me, he goes, man, he goes, you just don't seem like a cop. And I thought that was a weird statement to make. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's like, I've met a couple people become cops, and in like in air quotes, you kind of become that cop mentality. And he
Yeah.
said, you just kind of seem like the same person you are. And it really kind of struck me, and I thought about it. And I'm like, that from that moment on, I was very cognizant. We keep a big friend circle. We just don't hang out with cops. We have friends that are business owners and um, tradesmen, and we just have friends that are just not police or fire. And I kind of think helps a little bit of perspective too. And having, you're just not in that small bubble of all you talk about is the job. You can talk about a lot of
Right.
other stuff. So I think that's been helpful holistically, but just as far as personal life, like I said, my wife and I really like to travel. We always had like campers, so we like to go out and take that out. We've always been very involved in our son's sports and with scouting, and we just kind of kept a very diverse lifestyle as far as activities and just not 24/7. I purposely didn't work a ton of overtime because I wanted to focus on make sure at least I was home too. But when I was home, I was home. I
Yeah.
was dad and husband, not officer or sergeant or lieutenant Kuzik at home. Um, so and with that, then I've always tried to maintain kind of a I'm not in the gym 7 days a week, but I always make an emphasis to be at least 3 days a week, and that was my time. I'd put in my headphones, my AirPods as the technology evolved, and I just disconnect for that 45 minutes or so and just get a good workout in and then go home and just kind of making sure there's just different avenues in my life where it just wasn't constantly thinking about the job because there's so much time of the week that you are constantly thinking about the job and things weigh on you. And then especially as you promote, you're responsible for other employees and that really weighs on you. And yeah, there's just a lot of pressures on the job, just but like any profession, as you move through the ranks, you start gaining more responsibility as far as organizationally, strategically, and employee based, and it just that there's a lot of pressure, so you just have to have, in my opinion, just ways away from the job to really keep your mind fresh and be excited to come back to work, on that first day of the work week. So it's kind of how it's been for me overall.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I wanted to touch on the physical part of it because you said something that was really interesting. You said that it was your opportunity to clear your mind and not think about stuff. And I think that we forget that the physical health and mental health are really intertwined. They are very much connected. And you can have, you know, mental wellness without it being physical. But physical wellness does improve your mental health. And when we talk about mindfulness, there's always this word going around, this buzzword of like mindfulness, right? And I've asked the question, what is mindfulness? It's a word that goes around all the time. So what is it? And then you get a lot of head scratch where people are like, well, I don't know. And they're like, being mindful. I'm like, well, what is being mindful? And they're like, well, I guess it means, being present. And it's like, yes, that is it. Because what happens is when we are always stressed and we're always thinking about stuff, it's either ruminating on the past or it's thinking about things that haven't happened yet. And when that happens and our heart rate is up, our blood pressure, we have all these things and now it's cumulative stress. Right now it's that ongoing stress. It's like consistent stress. And that can lead to different, health issues long term. And so I love that you said, I wasn't thinking about stuff. Like my workout time was my opportunity to clear my mind and not think about being a cop, not think about the job, not think about what happened yesterday or what I have to do later today. And I think that that is something that we should all strive for, regardless of what training method you're using, whether it's the gym or breathing technique or whatever works for you, is having those moments to yourself where you don't have to think about it.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I also love that you said that you had a community and a family that helped you to stay grounded and feel like you, because you are so much more than what you do. And what you do is extremely important. There is an aspect of you that is not the job, and having that piece of yourself left over at the end of the day where you can go home and you can be around friends and family and people can be like, oh, it's Jason. It's you as a human being outside of the job. And I think that that's also a very important message for anyone who is younger in their career is try to maintain that sense of who you are when you go home.
Correct. Yeah. And then, avoid that hypervigilance all the time. But, you know, I think it's important to understand that the job doesn't define you. You should be defining the job.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that, that newer officer mentality, that's where the balance comes in, where especially when you try to impart that on newer officers that, yeah, you have to be very cognizant of your safety. You have to be cognizant of behaviorals, emotionally and physically, because those can be, threat indicators or indicators that maybe there's more to the story or there's more, maybe they are a victim. We have to become students of human behavior. But again, when you become overly, um, not invested, that's not the word, but when you just become overly sensitive to that all the time, yeah, that's why I think you made that comment of sense of self. You lose a little bit of that. But it's important not to lose all of it. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said balance and finding that like work-life balance. What advice would you have, or how did you navigate that work-life balance? Because it is a delicate balance, like you
Yeah.
said, to be able to kind of transition in and out. So, how did you navigate that, or what advice would you give to someone who's trying to navigate that balance?
Before anybody moves into public safety, you have a life. You had things you enjoy. regardless of what it is, don't ever, my advice would be don't ever lose that or forget about it, because whatever made you happy or made you relax and kind of part of that mosaic of who you are before you went into public safety, hold on to that. Because more than likely, when you move into the job and you have all these additional responsibilities and pressures on you, you're those things will still bring you the same joy. So you hold on to that, and that's where you kind of find that balance. Because you know, I mean, it's a cliche, and everybody says nobody gets into public safety for the money and things like that. You can make a very good career out of it, and obviously you'll provide for your family, but it's never a motivator for anybody moving into public safety.
Right.
It is truly the concept of being a protector of your community, being there for your community, because you want your community to thrive. You don't want people to be victimized. You don't want them to have those problems, and that's where you start realizing that, but you can't fix everybody's problems either. You can't make crime zero. You can't stop call people, communication specialists can't stop 911 calls from coming in. You're just there in the moment to do the best and provide the best service you can. And that's where I try to have some conversation with newer officers and understand that. Yes, you want to be fully committed to the job. It is your profession. You want to evolve and learn and grow, and it takes time and it takes training, but don't, once you leave the building, go back to being that person and remember those things that made you happy and you had fun. And that's where you have to start figuring out for yourself where that balance is, because the job can in a way be addictive, because you just start realizing, wow, I'm a protector of my community. I help people, and people always need help, and yeah, they do, but we can share the burden. There is a whole department to carry that burden. You come in and do your duty, you do the best you can for that 8, 10, 12 hours you're there, and then you go home and you be and then as you do that day after day after day, I think everybody kind of finds what that balance is, or should hopefully start finding that balance of what works for them. And yeah, and then it should hopefully lead to a mostly very fun and prosperous career. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And, one of my favorite things about you guys is that you are so passionate and you do have such that, you know, servant mentality of like wanting to help people and wanting to serve your community and wanting to be the best version that you possibly can. And I think that's one of like the best quality. Like I love that, but I do agree with you that there has to be that balance. Like there has to be life outside of that where you feel joy. And I think that that's great advice for anyone who is, earlier in their career, maybe someone who's been in the career for a long time who maybe just forgot about that and, taking a moment to reassess, your priorities and what's important to you outside of the job. One of the things you said earlier was you get addicted to it. And I want to talk about addiction. I say it in quotes in the context of some of the more unhealthy things that we talked about before. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is spending. And this is a part of wellness that I think is often not really expanded on. It's something that maybe is brushed over. And we talk about the different pillars of wellness and the things that are important. And we have mental health and physical health, and they say financial health and, home health and home wellness. Financial is something that I haven't yet expanded on this podcast. And it's funny because like every single first responder wellness conference that I go to, there's always this like joke of like, yeah, you get out of the academy and you buy yourself a big truck,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Exactly.
everyone laughs. They're like, yeah, everyone has this big truck. But then you drive through that parking lot and
Mhm.
it's all huge trucks. And it's really funny because you're like, wow, maybe that is actually what happens, like you kind of get your signing bonus or whatever it is that you get when you get out of the academy and you buy yourself a big truck. But we then talk about this in the context of like we have, a lot of really young people who are entering into this career right now and maybe don't know how to manage money and what financial wellness looks like long term. Would you be able to expand on that topic, what financial wellness looks like and how someone can set themselves up for success?
Yeah, and of course I have to give the big disclaimer. I have degrees in criminal justice, not financial management or
Yeah.
wealth asset management or anything like that. But it just kind of I'm happy to give my perspective and some things I've done.
Yeah.
It's funny you say the big truck thing, because absolutely I can relate to that 100%.
Do you
It
have a
just
big truck?
Everybody's got a big truck, and then for a while I started everybody went out and bought trucks, and then it was well, and it wasn't just good enough to have a new truck. Then you had to lift the truck,
Yep.
so everybody's lifting their trucks. And then for a while I went through a phase where everybody was buying Harley Davidson motorcycles, and some guys barely even ride it. It just yeah. And then I've worked with people that literally every 2 years there was a new vehicle, there's a new vehicle. It just
Yeah.
but I started, and I never really got into that trap. I would say my big spending things were like trips, vacationing, just getting out of town and seeing new things and meet new people. But I think, yeah, again, I touched on earlier, I said you don't get into career for money, but yet you can have a good career and it can be fiscally beneficial and things like that because we're not making a minimum wage either. Most
Right.
police departments and fire departments stuff, generally pay a very competitive wage, but you got to realize you got to manage it as well. It's like anything, and I started to have a shift in that mentality. I don't know, maybe after about 10 years on the job where it's like everything, you almost have to look at everything like an asset. When you buy that new truck, is it going to make you money or are you going to lose money? 100% guaranteed it's going to lose you money every single time. So in essence, you're spending your money to lose money. Well, start looking at that vehicle metaphorically. Is like, well, what vehicle do I want to buy that's actually going to appreciate and make me money? And stocks and bonds are tricky, but you just, get a good financial advisor, maybe find somebody that specializes in wealth management and growth and start working with that person. And then, the biggest thing is be disciplined on a budget. That's the biggest thing, especially for newer officers. Just make sure you're disciplined on a budget. I mean, everybody can see the headlines. You get a lot of people in their mid to later 20s are all complaining, I can't afford a car, I can't afford a house, I can't, rent's going through the roof, so I'm really trying to focus some attention organizationally on financial management for that point. Um, because long term, like I said, I wish somebody would sat me down and said, like, one of the advantages and a lot of states do this, is you can buy time in your state retirement system. Well, what I didn't understand is that the best time to buy it is at the beginning of your career. It doesn't mean you're going to retire 5 years early or what, but it gives you options, but it's never any cheaper than when you're a young officer. I actually did the math when I was a captain and it was astronomical to buy 1 year. But if you do it younger and you start working that out, and then what I did start immediately when I was in the academy was a deferred comp. So not only was I having a state retirement fund through Nevada, but then I started my own side account so every set amount, that money's just gone. So when your paycheck comes in, you don't even think about it. You have your set, that's my budget. That's what I live on now. And then as my raises came in, I'd start incrementally increase that amount to my deferred comp. So it's just another pot of money when I retired. And it was a joke. And I tell people that sometimes I would say, what would 65-year-old Jason tell 25-year-old Jason? Because 25-year-old Jason wants to go buy the big lifted trucks and the Harleys and have a bunch of fun, but 65-year-old is going to say, well, do I really care about that Harley at 65? No, but I do care having a deferred comp account and extra money, things like that. So it's just, and then again, statistics show what's one of the biggest stressors in relationships and marriage: money.
Right.
Not bad diet, not the yard's overgrown, the pool's got algae, none of that. It's financial, puts so much stress on relationships. And if you can start managing that money and setting up ways you'll have success down the road and take that burden off you, life does get a lot easier. Other things officers should start considering is, again, very litigious society. Officers get sued and everybody's worried about qualified immunity. Then you need, how do you protect your assets? How do you protect those? There's trust. Start looking at where you can start putting assets into trust that are, and some states have varying, degrees of protections as far as how much assets can be protected by trusts and various other vehicles. But that's where you start talking to, financial advisors and even attorneys, what is the best way to protect my assets? When you start accumulating a home, when you start maybe getting some money in the bank, how do you protect that? I just don't think a lot of officers think in that capacity. They're just happy to do the job. I'm paying the bills. We're family vacation, everything's good. But long term, if some reason you get hit with a 1983 action where they can go after a lot of money, yeah, then again, it comes all back to that stress. You're always gonna be stressed if you get sued, but if you feel that your assets and how you're gonna be able to provide for your family down the road is in a much better and protected position than without, again, at least you know that. and then you can just focus on whatever's coming your way. But yeah, that's where I think and that's what I started doing is creating myself where I've set up positions where, a lot of my assets are protected and something does happen, or heaven forbid you suddenly pass away. If you have wills and trusts and other avenues like that, all your assets are handled. You don't have to, your surviving members don't have to worry about any of that stress because you've already laid out the plan for where the division of your assets are going. Again, all of that is just pre-planned. So a lot of it just boils down to that concept of pre-planning. Just you have to think in that capacity, I think, and it's just important. And just that's one less burden I've ever had to worry about. And anybody I've known who's financially set up their financial planning that capacity, yeah, it's just they just don't ever talk or think about it anymore. So I know I
Yeah,
went really
well,
long on that. I apologize,
no,
but
I thought that
yeah,
was great. I thought that was great. And I also love that you were saying like, because I almost like felt like I was exhaling because it just sounds like that's one less thing that you have to stress about. And it does feel like you're taking that burden off of you, knowing that you're setting yourself up for success. And I love that that is a focus organizationally that you're trying to infuse into like your wellness programming of saying, hey, like these are some things that could help start thinking about this, start planning this. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor, but these are some things that have worked for me that have been really great. And the one thing you said that I loved was think about your future self. Because I think that we all get guilty, we're all guilty of this in one way or another, of like kind of just being in the day to day and like putting one foot in front of the other. But if you can zoom out a little bit and say, okay, are the steps that I'm taking now going to make my future self happy or my future self proud? And then starting to like reevaluate what you're doing, because I've had to do that myself in various aspects of my life, of all aspects of wellness, of like, okay, do I have the discipline and the things in place now where when I am 60, 70 years old, I'm going to look back and be like, wow, I'm so glad I did that
yeah,
because now I'm healthier, whether that's physically, mentally, financially. So I love that you said that. Think about your future self. And it is easier said than done, especially when you're really young. Like I had a recruit that had a tattoo that said 2006. And I was like, no, it was 2001 on there. There's a tattoo that said 2001, and I almost like keeled over. I was like, I don't know how I got to be like the old lady in the room. But when I was that young, like I wasn't thinking about anything for my future. I was a disaster when I was in my early 20s when it came to wellness. Like I wasn't thinking about finances or mental health like in the way that I do now or physical fitness. And so I do think that it's easier said than done. But when you have organizations that are supporting that early in the career, then I think that that just helps move things along and at least bring that awareness. So I'm happy
yeah,
that that's something
absolutely.
that you guys are focusing on. So I know that you are really invested in the wellness of your organization, and financial wellness is one piece of it that you're infusing. What are some other things that you've implemented that you found to be successful in the wellness
Yeah.
arena?
Well, since I've been here, came up about 2.5 years ago. The officers talked to me about wellness, but nothing was truly formalized. So it was on everybody's consciousness and in their thought process. So what I've been trying to gradually bring along is that, yeah, I'm very much on board with officer wellness, but the whole package, like I said, the physical, mental, financial, and then even the family.
Mhm.
So we're not, like I said, a super big agency. We're community of 35,000, the agency's 71 total. And so it's just a lot of it, ironically enough, because some of it comes down to finances, how can you infuse some of these ideas, but you have to be able to pay for them as well. So with some little bit of fiscal gymnastics, we're able to come up with the annual uh, allotment for the Cortico app because I researched that and found out it covers a lot and it covers all of those. When I started researching it, it covers all of those aspects that I think are important. So we've been investing in that in the last couple of years, and we've pushed it out to the agency and made a big push that, hey, look, if you need any, yeah, like I said, it's family support, fiscal support, peer support, all these ideas are all wrapped up into just one app on your phone. You can open it up and just look for what you want. And when I worked with them, they uploaded all our local therapists in the app. So everybody that's approved to the city through AAP or even outside, there's some other ones that are willing to work with first responders and can work with first responders. They're all within the app, so it's kind of one-stop shopping, and it's very. And the biggest thing, especially with you work with first responders for a very long time, you understand is anonymity is very important.
Yep.
And then when one of the first things I talked about when I came here was a peer support team, and as soon as it was brought to light, I understood the logic behind it. But they said the organization has tried that before in-house, but because we're such a small agency, everybody knows everybody, even within our city and even all our partner agencies, because we're all so close. All the officers and all the firemen, we all know each other. They recognize voices. You're talking about a certain city. So the anonymity wasn't there, and there was no support for that because they didn't want to pick up a phone and talk to, now they know who each other's talking to. And so we found an organization that's a nonprofit within the state of Idaho, Courageous Survivors. So that's kind of become our peer support, but it's retired officers from all over the state. So you really will have that sense of anonymity. So the Cortico app is kind of the big first push. I have research therapy dogs. There is a local vendor. They're just very expensive, and it's not off the table. It's just, once again, have to kind of do a little bit of physical gymnastics within our budget to start moving to that. But it is in the back of my mind. And but then right now it's just pushing the idea. We've just concluded our last 5-year strategic plan. So I have a panel, cross-section of whole agency working on our next 5 years. And actually one of the big goals, and one of the ones we're really putting a lot of effort behind, is a 5-year strategic plan for officer wellness. And I'm having, I have dispatchers and detectives and officers and command staff. We're all in on this panel. And how does that look? What do we want this agency to look like in 5 years? What are we pushing for? And like some ideas is which we can do is, hey, just buy some, because we don't have any gym here in our building. It's a very old building, and it's just we're space for, but we could buy some row machines was like an idea. And just, how do we start integrating more aspects of some of the Cortico principles just holistically into the agency? And just there's a lot of, how do we incentivize, say, fitness, and come up with some ideas that really, say, hey, look, we understand we can't provide all types of avenues for fitness and wellness, but what can we do to at least really emphasize it's important to staff, it's important to us, and really push that? Because I made the joke, is like you walk into the trash can outside the patrol door, and it's filled with energy drinks and in fast food bags.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, how do we start pushing that concept of, hey, a little more healthier eating, a little more, wellness, make sure you're getting your sleep every night, just everything that just kind of makes you, a little more fit person for, to be a better parent, to be a better spouse, to be a better officer, dispatcher, however it looks. So yeah, again, we said the words earlier, just evolving. It's evolving, and it's on the consciousness of everybody, and we're just trying to figure out how it looks best for the Lewiston Police Department.
I love you said physical gymnastics. I've actually never ever heard that before, and it makes complete sense of what you're saying. Like I totally understood what you what you meant when you said that, but I've never heard that before, and I was laughing at that physical gymnastics. But the one thing that stuck out to me is that you're asking your people and you're coming together as a team to see what do they need. And I think that it's really important to remember that in wellness, it's not a one size fits all. And what's important to your organization might look different for your neighboring organization. And so actually sitting down and asking them, what do you need? What's important to you? And then how can we achieve that budgetarily in like the most, effective and efficient way?
Yes.
And like you said, you can't do it all, but at least you can hit some of the most important pieces of that. And then I think also working together as a team, because we hear this all the time of like buy-in, buy-in. How are we going to get people to do it? How are we going to get the buy-in? The more you can talk to your people and you can get them working together as a team to piece this program together, then that's automatic cultural wellness and
Yes.
buy-in.
Yes.
So I love that you mentioned that. And it sounds like that's a really strong strategy and that you're looking at, 5 years ahead of like, how can we accomplish that?
Yes. And that's actually, you just made a term, cultural buy-in. I haven't really heard that phrase, and that's exactly it. Yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, because once you kind of, there's that old cliche in management, culturally policy all day long for lunch.
Mhm.
Exactly. But if you can bake it into your culture, where it's the expectation, and looking out for each other and take care of each other, and overall, yeah, we believe that wellness is important to the longevity of the career. Exactly. I think you hit a very important point, and that's I think every agency should strive for that. Yeah, because you want your employees here for 25 plus years, and you want them here healthy and happy. So yeah,
Yeah. And I love that you said at the end that you want them healthy and happy because that's what needs to be added to it. It's like you want them there for 25 years if they're thriving.
yes,
You don't want them there sick and miserable and unwell and, choosing unhealthy coping mechanisms because they don't have resources. Like we want them healthy and happy and thriving.
yeah,
Maybe you can't make everyone happy, but at least,
yeah.
happier, maybe.
Exactly.
Um,
Happier. Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Happiness. There is a lot of self-determination with that. Yeah.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
then, and one thing I always tell, especially the new hires, is I kind of have this conversation with them. Once they finish the academy and we talk a little bit, one of the goals, and I think it's the goal of any leader for any organization is, yeah, you talk about you want them here 25, happy and healthy, but I tell them it's equally important to me, if not more so, that they are happy and healthy post-retirement for the next
Mhm.
25 or 30 years, and past practice obviously indicates future. So yeah, if we can kind of create those paths of wellness throughout their early life and career, that should carry over in the retirement, and then hopefully they'll live to be 90 years old and just have a fantastic life, all the way until, we all end up where we end up. So
I love past practice indicates future. I wrote that down
no,
because it's true.
yes,
And it goes back to like your future self.
yes.
Are you doing the things today that are going to create that longevity for you in the future? One of the things that, along the lines of like, we want to keep people who are there healthier, happier, thriving. To me, the word that pops up is retention, retaining your staff and the people that are there, keeping them there. And we know that, excuse me, right now across the country, there are a lot of organizations that are really struggling with recruitment and retention. A lot of people are short-staffed, and there's a lot of people leaving the profession early. There's a lot of lateraling happening, and there's a hiring crisis. You're having trouble finding new quality recruits. What has been your experience within your current organization coming in, with the recruitment and the retention?
Yeah, when I came here, we just like all agencies, we were having shortages on the sworn side, but also in dispatch, and even getting to dispatch, it was actually we're moving to the point where it was like critical. Um,
Mhm.
Having discussions about, even, there were dispatch, there was mandatory overtime, and it was, how do we have to start switching to longer hours? But the patrol side was really short staffed too. So again, it creates a lot stronger burden, and you're right, the profession in general across the board, there is a huge hiring crisis, and even retention. And it's a spectrum of rationale. It's not just one real reason. It's hard to pin it down even into one discussion. There's a broad range of factors that go into that. But so we had to sit down again as a team and figure out, how do we hire, how do we and try to retain, and what do we do as responsible managers? How do we manage this crisis really? So we initially started with just some simple stuff. Hey, let's advertise on Google. Just, the real where you expect everything and where everybody's trying to hire. And we really got no traction. We had no applications. Nothing really made any movement. So I went ahead and made a decision to contract with a media company. And then we produced a video, and then they had really advanced analytics and different platforms and ways to reach out. And they had a really good plan, I thought, for this one side, but also the dispatch side, to try to get to people come. But really, the focus on in talking with them is that it's not, you know, there's aspects of the job that are very, high energy, fast paced, and you see a lot of recruiting videos. It's all about, hey, SWAT and helicopters and canines and things like that. And those are absolutely factors of the position, but I want to focus more on it's we at least like I said to Lewiston, we can offer really strong work-life balance. You can come here and we can offer all those things. We have a SWAT team, crisis negotiations. You can and do all those fun aspects, but also understand the job is very community oriented. That's a very small piece of the pie, and I think over people get in the job again, they want to serve. They want to be part of the community. They want to serve the community. So I thought it was important to focus on that. And I think you're seeing that paradigm shift a lot around the nation, and a lot of police leaders are saying, hey, look, yeah, all the running and gunning is a fun part of the job, but it's really a small portion of it. There's also this aspect of it where where you go to community meetings and you go to schools and you do, you talk to people and you help them in their worst times and the worst days. But also, we're a type of organization, especially like at Lewiston, where, we're very outdoorsy as far as a community. There's a lot of opportunities for hunting and fishing and boating because, we have the Clearwater, we got the Snake River right here. We have Coeur d'Alene just to the north and Dorshag Reservoir to the south. There's a lot of outdoor. So we can also offer a really good work-life balance, and where you can, like something I talked about, you can leave and just have fun, be yourself. So that was really became an emphasis of our recruitment. Um, and I thought that I hoped that would speak to kind of the newer generation that, hey, look, we're not going to chain you to this career and expect you to be here 80 hours a week. Um, you can raise a family, you can really have a good life. And I think it worked. We're to the point now. I just got the last two that fills all our vacancies on the patrol side. I just hired them, and they'll start the academy next month. Um, we're not fully staffed in communications, but we've got one onboarding, and we've got another one that's looking very promising backgrounds. That'll leave us with just two vacancies. When I came here, we started with, I think it was 8 or 9. We only have
Wow.
15 dispatchers, so we're over
Wow.
50% vacancies. So we're getting there. And then it's kind of working into that overall holistic wellness idea that, again, I want you to come in and work hard and be professional and grow and evolve and have a great and be a great representative of the city of Lewiston. But also we're focused on you as a person. We're focused on you moving forward, and trying to set you up for success professionally, but also personally, and like even with dispatch, I'm working with the manager, and she has wonderful ideas, and she's always looking, how do we make it better in there? Because again, all those employees are sitting in a room with darkened light for 12 plus hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week. So, hey, how about, can we get like a little portable, like treadmill being in there so they
Mhm.
can, when they've got some downtime, they can, exercise and keep active. And they were just able to secure a massage chair. So when they had their 15-minute breaks, you can kind of go in, and I even sat in that thing, and it's amazing. But yeah, we're just also, again, looking for those ideas moving forward. And that's kind of all the things we were starting to emphasize as far as but then hopefully that works as far as our retention, that we're not just here expecting them, to just work. We understand there's more to the person than just the police officer, the dispatcher, or the um, evidence or the records or things like that we're just trying to be supportive and helpful and put them in a best position to succeed long term that we can. So, and I think that's what's helping with our recruitment and our retention.
I absolutely love that when you were like, okay, how are we going to get new people in here? And your focus and emphasis was on the wellness component, the community, the work-life balance, that you can raise a family, that you can have activities and interests outside of work, like outdoor activities. And not only did you come up with that idea to put that out there, but it was successful. And I think that that does speak to the younger generation. And I've had tons of conversations about the younger generation, and like, say what you will, but I do think that one of the things that is important to them is that it's like, how is the organization going to support my long-term wellness? What type of programming do you have in place, or what type of culture do you have that's going to support my long-term wellness? But also, how can I come into this organization and still have that work-life balance and outside of the job? And so I think that we're starting to see a lot of that, of like, how can we or how can you guys as an organization um, be enticing
Yeah.
to that younger generation. But then even more than that is like you said, we also care about the people who are already here, and how can we retain them so that they are thriving on the job. So I love that you did that, and I'm so glad that that was successful and that you are almost back up to full staffing with that focus.
Which then it helps too, because then there's reduced overtime. People can, start have their time to decompress and recreate, things like that. So yeah, it was, again, when you're really in the bad, like all agencies, and talking to, like I said, my partner chiefs and sheriffs in the area, it's like we all have the same problem. It's in when we talk about it, have meets and talk about this topic, again, it's when you're really down, it really affects the current employees. So that's why
Mm,
there's such an emphasis on recruitment. But again, you have to have the right people too. When you get the right people coming in your organization, and then, you just have to do your 40 and okay, then yeah, again, then you start looking forward to coming to work and yeah. So again, exactly. And even like I said, the time off and the recreate, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. The newer generation coming up, yeah, they're used to more options and opportunities. And it's nothing it's something to lean into.
yeah.
Because again, those are going to be our future leaders too. So you lean into to their best characteristics of their personal life, and then you just kind of mold it within the world of first responders, and that's our next generation: police officers, firefighters, dispatchers, yeah, paramedics, yeah.
Well, and on that topic of people who are younger in their career, kind of that up and coming generation, if you will, what words of advice would you give to them in the context of wellness? Maybe something that, you did that was really helpful for you, or maybe something that you wish you would have done that would have helped you out. What words of advice would you give to that younger up and coming generation?
I would have started investing sooner. If really a lot of it for me comes down to finances. If you're fiscally sound, um, it takes a lot of pressure off you, but it gives you opportunities, it gives you options too. And that's the biggest thing. And I wish, yeah, there's a couple guys I work with coming up. I found out way later without my career that they were very sound fiscally and very smart with how they invested and what they invested, and they had people in their sphere. But either way, yeah, the biggest thing is just to make sure you get an idea how money works. And I again, I can't prove it. There's no data that I can point to, but it just feels younger generations, you talk to people late teens, early 20s now, they don't really understand like how credit cards work. They were never taught even how to go open a bank account or how interest works or how the stock market works or just in general how money works and how it can work for you. So I think especially coming up through the ranks and then when you get in this job and you're starting to make pretty good money, yeah, manage it and just understand how it works and make it work for you. Um, yeah, maybe you won't have the coolest new car in the block, but who cares? Does your car start and get you from A to B? You know, um, that's the important thing. The rest of it is just make sure it's working for you. But other than that, and then we talked about earlier, I think the biggest thing is just don't kind of forget who you are and where you came from. I think as you move into this public safety world, keeping those outside interests, it helps keeps you grounded and it helps keeps you from just becoming all because the job will consume as much of you as you allow it. So you just it's you just don't let it overtake your life. It's a wonderful career, and I would tell my 25-year-old self, absolutely do it again. It's been, like I said, we talked earlier, how I can't imagine believe how fast it's gone for me. Like I said, I still have indelible memories of the academy, and all throughout my career. But biggest thing is in just so and lean into the career itself. The more you learn, the more you embrace it and you accept and adapt. And that's the biggest thing. Adapt over the years because the job I came into back in the day is not the job now. Foundationally, sure, we kind of do the thing, but how we do it per se is changed so much in the time I've been here and the tools we have to do it with. And lean into that, just be willing to accept and change as you get older, because as we get older, people don't like to change as much. Well, the job dictates it. You have to. But just kind of keep that open-mindedness and just keep that balance of take care of yourself, but take care of your organization, take care of your community. As long as you can kind of keep that perspective, I think that will definitely benefit people coming through, and having, this career. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much. Those were great words of advice. I have really truly enjoyed this conversation. I think we covered a lot of really unique topics that we don't typically cover, and I really, really appreciate your insights on all of it. So thank you so much for your time.
oh, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to come on your show. And I'm glad you reached out. I'm glad we had this opportunity to connect and talk about this
Yeah.
really important topic. And I'm just really glad wellness is more and more becoming embraced across the profession. So, and I think like I said, as the policing and first responder embrace it more, I think it's just going to benefit and it's going to just create a synergy that I think we'll be able to start in helping these next generations to take over because you want to leave that lasting legacy. And, we all want to look back at our professions and know it's been left in good hands, and that those folks are doing it the right way for the right reasons, and that, someday they can enjoy the benefits we're going to get someday when they finally retire. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.